I speak for so many people when I say that we are grateful to have access again to this burnt and refurbished building so that it could serve as the gathering place for this celebration of life today. And I'm so glad that we could all finally make it work in the end. However you find yourself here today, welcome to the celebration of the life of Sid Jaycock. This is a gathering of friends who are grateful to have known Sid, people who have shown up today to form a circle of love and support around his family. Together we bear witness, we embrace all of you as you share in so many emotions, speaking with fondness, gratitude, and tenderness, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, sitting in heavy silence, and naming all the ways that Sid lived and how well his life impacted yours and left its mark. And Doreen, you sit at the center of this warm circle of care. All of us gather today especially to hold you tightly, to lift you up, to celebrate the life that you and Sid shared together. May you know and experience the love and support of all these people who show up today for you. Everyone, you are encouraged to join in the reception downstairs after this service. And I trust that you will use this as a time of refreshment for yourself, but also a chance to reach out, to reconnect, to embrace, and hopefully to say with kindness the words that are on your heart. This order of service is all you'll have to keep track of things. There won't be anyone announcing who comes up next. Everyone will just follow along, so be sure to keep that at hand. Won't you pray with me as we open this service? God of abiding love, we gather today with full hearts. This is a time for remembering, for grief, for celebration. And we know that you meet with us here in the mixture of so many good memories and emotions. We meet with people who are near and dear to us, people who have traveled a long way to honor this day. What a gift to live the life that Sid Jaycock lived. A man so well loved, someone who shared his enthusiasm and generous spirit with his family and his friends. We ask that your mercies be with his family as they mourn, and we ask for your Spirit to guide us as we tend to one another. Together we name your promises for hope and renewal, of resurrection, and all things made new. Finding comfort in your goodness to us, we commit this time to reflect and connect. Spirit of Christ, be with us now in these rich and heavy moments. Amen.
Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long.
Micah 6:8. He has told you, O mortal, what is good and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and walk humbly with your God.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming, especially on such a cold day. It's very much appreciated. And thank you for those that are attending electronically. We appreciate you attending. And most importantly, on behalf of our whole family, thank you to all of you for your many kindnesses, your many condolences over the last month or so. It's been very much appreciated by all of us. I was driving with my wife Tanya last week, and I guess I must have been in a grumpy mood because she asked me what's up, and it must have been pretty grumpy because sometimes I'm grumpy generally, but anyway, she asked me what was up, and I said to her, well, look, if I have to be honest with you, I'm really not looking forward to speaking today. And she said, well, I thought today was supposed to be a celebration of life. And I said, well, it is. She said, well, maybe you need to change your perspective and focus on that, because this is what it's about, and there's a lot to celebrate about your dad's life. And, well, right as usual, it must get kind of boring, actually, but to be right all the time. But anyway, in any event, there is much to celebrate, much to observe and honor. But to better understand that, some history is helpful. Dad was born on February the 28th, 1935 in Seaman, Saskatchewan. That's a small town near to the farm his parents then lived on. The farm's roughly 10 kilometers south of Raymore and about 110 kilometers north of Regina. Dad's father was William Pearson Jaycock. He was born in 1885 in Copthewick, North Yorkshire, England. It's a small village about 4 kilometers east of the city of Ripon. And William immigrated to Saskatchewan in 1906. He came with 2 brothers. They homesteaded some land in the Wodona area, which is just north of Raymore area. And to make a long story short, eventually, shortly thereafter, that homesteaded property was exchanged for the farm property near Raymore. Dad's dad, Grandpa Jaycock, passed away in 1971 at age 86. Dad's mom, Marion, who went by May, as a Marion Welsh name, Jane Davis, she was born on October the 4th, 1901 in Chubut province in Patagonia, Argentina. She immigrated to Saskatchewan with her family a year or two after she was born in 1902 or 1903, and her family were part of an immigration from Patagonia to Saskatchewan of about 250 Welsh people that's well documented, and they homesteaded a farm in the Bangor area of Saskatchewan. Grandma Jaycock attended Central Collegiate in Regina and then went to normal school, which is Teachers College then, in Saskatoon, and then she taught at numerous schools in Saskatchewan. She passed away on June the 15th, 1987 at age 85. William married May, who was then the local school teacher at as Kathy tells me, at the church where, at the school where William happened to be the chair of the school board. I shudder to think what that might mean in today's world, but in 1928, August the 7th, 1928, he was then 42 or 43 years old, and she was 26. So he'd been there farming until that age to get married. They had 2 children. My dad's older brother, who was 6 years older, Bert, and he was born in May of 1929, and he passed away in June of 2019. And then when my dad's father was 50 years old and his mother was 34, they had Dad. And Dad was raised on the family farm until he was high school age. And at that time, they moved into Regina so that Dad could attend high school in the city. He attended at Scott Collegiate, and he would have been 14 or 15 when they moved from the farm into the city. Dad's farm life, his experience was formative. He talked about it a lot, constantly. It was very important to him. He was raised in a simple wood frame house, pumped well water, no central heating, an outhouse. In the winter, would wake up with his water glass frozen at his bedside, those sorts of things. His father got up at about 5 in the morning to light the fire every day. He worked hard hard, long hours, as did everybody in the family on the farm. He attended at a one-room school, Lanwenner School, which is about a half-mile distant, often described by Dad as miles away and uphill both ways, but it's about a half mile away when you actually look at it. They walked to school, they rode horses to school, or they skied to school. The older students taught the younger students. They were a small group in the community, and they went to school together. He loved the time he spent alone in his thoughts when he was on the farm. He just loved being out with his dog, out with the animals, out working, just being alone, just able to think, able to reflect on life, and he really did love that. He was very mechanically inclined. In fact, his father had a serious farm accident with an implement and was in a body cast when Dad was about 12, and Dad basically had to take over the farm for that year or so by himself, 12 years old, but did it. Never complained about it, said it was a bit of a challenge, but that was about it. He describes living in a community where everybody helped each other, everybody looked after each other. His father was the de facto local vet. He had no education or training, but he was the guy, if you had a cow in trouble or a horse in trouble, he was there. And his dad was also a water witcher. Interesting thing, but anyway, it was a very strong community he grew up in. They looked after each other. He was a strong student, and following high school, he attended at the University of Saskatchewan, where he graduated in engineering in 1957. He always remembered and reflected on his university years with great fondness. He really loved going to university. He shared stories of many times and the best part for me was always his buddies were Red Dog, Moose, Goop, Dwayne, and Vern. I mean, you just can't make that up, but anyway. Having met them as adults, they're all really very nice fellows, but he met Mom. They met in 1956 in Statler. Dad had a job at the BA oil gas plant, which was near Statler, related to his engineering studies. Apparently, Mom told me this. The lady that Dad boarded with knew Mom. Everybody knew everybody. And thought Mom should meet Dad and his friends, the other students from the University of Saskatchewan that were out there. And then it turns out that she did run into Dad at a wedding dance. And Dad asked Mom for her number at the end of the night. He called her the next day. And by the time he was ready to return to university after that summer of work, he told Mom he'd really like for her to move to Saskatoon so they could continue to date and see each other. So in October, Mom and her friend Cleo moved to Saskatoon. And I guess the rest, as they say, is history. Mom and Dad were engaged on Convocation Day 1957 when Dad finished school. They were married at Statler on November the 16th, 1957. We were looking at some very cute pictures of Dixie the other day, the bridesmaid, or ring bearer rather. And they were just 2 days shy of their 68th wedding anniversary when Dad passed away. So a long marriage. Mom joined Dad out east. He got a job while he was at university. He was recruited by a company called American Standard, and which required him to go to Ontario. So after they were married, Mom joined him in Ontario. They lived in Ottawa, where I was born. They lived in Windsor, where my sister Kathy was born. But they wanted to return to the West. So they moved back to Calgary in 1962. Dad continued with American Standard for a short period of time, 2 or 3 years, before he was recruited by a man named Art Meyer, a fellow engineer, a church friend, a good family friend of, as it turns out, who recruited him to join Associated Engineering, where he spent most of his working career. Mom and Dad lived in Calgary from 1962 to 1969, where Susan was born. And then they lived in Regina for a year, 1969-70. Dad had a job out there, and his father was old at that time, so it was very, very good for us to get to spend a year there. Interesting place to have lived. After being in Regina, they moved to Edmonton in 1970, and they were in Edmonton until 1979. They then moved back to Calgary in 1979, and they were there from 79 to 84. So one last trip up Highway 2, I promise, just one more. In 1984, 42 years ago, they came back to Edmonton, and this is where they have, of course, stayed until now. Dad lived at home until the day he passed away. And huge thanks to my sister, her husband Carl, my mom for facilitating and making that a possibility, a reality. Dad and I watched the Saskatchewan Roughriders beat the BC Lions 24-21 on the 8th of November, the weekend before he passed away. And I'm sure he somehow knows that the Riders defeated the Alouettes on November the 16th, 2 days after he passed away. So I wish you could have seen it. He had breakfast at his own table on Friday, the 13th of November. And he watched his beloved Oilers play that evening. Unfortunately, a 5-4 loss to the Columbus Blue Jackets, but a very strong comeback at the end of the game, so not a total loss for him. He had a long and happy life, a long and happy life. With that history in mind, I turn to what there is, in my mind, to celebrate. What is there to observe and honor about Dad? He was caring, he was calm, he was kind, he was wise. I can't tell you how many times I got advice from him, good advice. I remember one time in particular when Andrew was giving me trouble as a teenager, hard to imagine, I know, but he'd sit patiently and listen, and basically the advice was usually short and to the point. And he says, are you sure that's a hill you want to die on? That was the advice. Of course it wasn't, and I didn't, and I'm glad for the advice, but he was very wise. He was intelligent. He had a successful career as an engineer. He was a good mentor. He was sort of management focused in his career, I think because of that skill. He was a people person, a team leader, a team guy. He constantly engaged us in meaningful conversations and discussions at home about important topics. He loved to talk about politics or religion or anything that would start an argument he enjoyed, and I mean argument in the good sense. He really did teach us a lot. He was a hardworking, incredibly handy guy. Built things. I mean, this comes from his farm life. I just, I have many memories, but one that I don't know why always sticks in my mind is like Dad came home from work one day, a day of, suit and tie on, and got his tie off and his sleeves rolled up and with his suit pants still on, tore the washing machine apart because it had failed. I mean, a million parts all over the floor, and put it back together, and it was fixed several hours later. Just there was nothing he wasn't afraid to tackle. So. He was great that way. He was a good friend to his many friends. He was loyal to his friends. Mom and Dad had many work-related, church-related, and bridge friends. They had lifelong friends. They stuck with their friends. He was a man of faith. He had a profound understanding of the central and inclusive message of Christ. Love one another. He understood that. He didn't complicate the message for you. He understood. He understood that. He communicated that. He loved his community. He loved his country. He was always mindful that he was the son of immigrant parents. It would have been so distressed and saddened to see these separatists lining up to sign petitions and things. I'm glad he hasn't had to see that. But anyway, he was a good Canadian. I guess most importantly, perhaps, he was a good family man, most importantly to me. It was always clear to you, you always knew Dad loved you unconditionally. You just knew it. He didn't have to say it, you knew it. A Jewish friend of mine said to me following Dad's passing, "May his memory be a blessing Well, I'd heard this condolence before, and I thought, I don't know why, but I thought I should have a look into that. May his memory be a blessing. And I did a little look, and I guess I wrote a sentence or two here about what it is. It's a traditional expression of condolence, especially in Judaism, meaning we hope remembering the deceased will bring comfort and inspiration, keeping their good deeds and legacy alive for those grieving. It's often seen as a way to honor the righteous dead and comfort the grieving. It's a beautiful phrase to offer sympathy, acknowledging that the memories shared can offer solace and continue to teach positive lessons. Well, I can say unconditionally, remembering my dad and thinking about him, which I often do, it's indeed comforting and inspiring to me to have that memory, and his memory is a blessing to me. And I only hope that his memory is a blessing to all of you. Thank you.
Greg's trying to choke me up before I even start. One thing I really love about a celebration of life is when you walk away really feeling a sense of knowing that person. And it's a great privilege to tell you about my dad. And it's our dad. I speak on behalf of Greg and Sue too. And Sue, if you don't knock it off, I'm not gonna make it. One of the very earliest memories of my dad was when he would come to discipline, and I'm air quoting because my dad was not a great disciplinarian. He'd come to discipline Greg and I at bedtime. For a while after my baby sister was born, we shared a room, and we played this great game at night called Rover. And there'd be many calls up the stairs, you kids settle down, you kids go to bed, whatever. And then eventually Dad would come up, and he would say in his stern, not so stern, voice, you kids settle down, it's time for sleeping. And then he would tweak my little toes, and he'd say, and you too. Sorry, Greg. Now, in Greg's favor, he got way more turns on the racetrack that my dad had built. Now, this racetrack was the coolest thing. We had a house that had a crawl space, and he built this great big racetrack set on this drawer that pulled out of the crawl space, and I was always a little jealous that Greg got more turns than I did. But it was one of the many construction projects that my dad loved. When I think back on a lifetime with my dad, it was like that. It was full of love, and it was full of laughter. And that laughter was wrapped up in love. He was a great dad, and we have been truly blessed to have had a dad like that. Looking back on our growing up years, a lot that we did with my dad was ski. It was one of the things we did. And for some weird reason, he always thought you shouldn't turn the heat on in the car when you were driving to the mountain. And I could never quite figure out what the big difference was between the car and the ski lodge, but that was his thing, frozen on the way up to the mountain. We had lots of moments of laughter in our skiing days, and this one time I remember riding up the T-bar at Mount Norquay with my dad, and he had the T-bar behind his knees because we were little, and he told me this joke. And I still to this day remember the punchline. Can't remember the joke, but I remember the punchline. And it was hickory dackory dock. And you can Google it later, just don't Google it now. And it struck my little kid funny bone, and I was killing myself laughing. And of course I wiped my dad out off the T-bar. And he quickly pulled us to the side so we didn't wipe out anybody else. And we laid there in the snow and laughed and laughed and laughed. Now he could have been really annoyed. Not at all. Sometimes laughter on the slopes were at my dad's expense. He wiped out, I remember one time he wiped out into the well under the trees, those wells of powder, and his feet were sticking straight up in the air, and he's yelling at me, could you just help me up? Stop laughing, just help me up. I didn't know then that those wells could actually be quite dangerous, but it was funny at the time. But they got me back really good one time when I broke my skis going down Brewster. And Greg and Dad had this brilliant idea that I should just stand on the back of Greg's skis and he would ski me down the mountain. Well, one thing you cannot do is stand on skis in ski boots and, make any progress down the mountain. So after I face planted really good, they were suggesting I just hop back on. It's kind of, not happening, guys. They were a little disappointed when I decided to walk down the mountain. The last time I downhill skied, my dad took me to Sunshine. Amanda was about a year old, and we went early on the most spectacular day. The sun was shining, fresh snow on the mountain, and we were the first people to make the run down Brewster. It was extraordinary and made so much more extraordinary by being with my dad. An absolutely perfect day. Greg mentioned, and I mentioned, he loved a construction project. So we moved to Edmonton. He finished our basement. It was kind of like a cool English pub. It even had a wall with an invisible door in it, and great place for our friends to come over and hang out. But my favorite construction memories were at Miquelon when we built the cottage. One day, my dad and I went out to survey the property, and in the back corner of the property, there was a slough, and it was the fall, and it was mostly dried up, but it was still pretty muddy. And so Dad decided he should piggyback me through the slough. So we also had much laughter that day. Another distinct memory of laughing in the construction, or at least people laughing at me, was my job when we were pouring the piles for the cottage was to hold the tube steady while Greg and Dad poured the concrete in, or all over me. I could still to this day don't know if all that splashing was just on purpose or not, but anyway, we had good times. So many family memories at Miquelon. My kids got to grow up spending summers there, and when Christy was about 4 years old, my dad decided that we should go out in the dinghy and go fishing. So off we went on this little fishing expedition to the little stock pond they have out there. And when we got back to the dock, Christy and I got out of the dinghy, and it came up, and there were nails poking down from the dock that punctured the dinghy. So there's my poor dad trying to stand up in the deflating dinghy. Also something you can't do. So I'm killing myself laughing, and he's yelling at me, "Stop laughing and pull me out." And now, in his defense, he couldn't swim, and he was really quite afraid of water, but the water was probably up to his waist at that space. So anyway, he got the last laugh. I pulled the dinghy out and proceeded to wipe out right in the mud. So the wonderful thing for my dad recently is that we discovered that our cottage was being used as an Airbnb. So the last couple of years, my daughters and I got to go out there and spend some time at our old cottage. We were able to take a video for Dad, and he was so proud that all his painstaking finishing that he had done was still there. They hadn't changed anything. My dad was a bit of a pot stirrer. Greg's maybe mentioned this. So I remember on my wedding day, I'm all ready to go, and gotta be there. And Dad's pottering around, pours himself a cup of coffee. It's like, for crying out loud, could we just go to the church? And just getting a rise out of me because he knew I hated being late. Another time, I distinctly remember his pot stirring. We had trained for the Terry Fox run together. And so we're there on the day, and we're at the starting line, and he says, "Ready, set, go," and takes off on me. And then he proceeds to gloat for, years after how he won the Terry Fox run. My mom and my siblings could definitely tell you some pot-stirring stories. Another special memory of Dad. One time Mom I don't even know where she went, was not home for Halloween. And my dad decided that while she was gone to decorate the house with cobwebs and spiders, and he dressed up as Dracula and scared the grandkids to death when they showed up at the door. He also dressed up as Santa every year, gave the grandkids presents that he had picked out for them. And that tradition has now been passed on to our family, and our grandkids have Santa Auntie and Uncle Elf, who wear the costumes that were my dad's. My dad and I also went Christmas shopping every year for my mom for many, many years, year after year after year. And we used to always joke about him using his magic to park at the door. I'm not sure what he did, but we always got a parking place at the door, and it was crazy. And then afterwards, we'd go out for lunch, and during lunch, he'd tell us stories about growing up on the farm, or his travels, or his career. And they were fascinating, and he loved to tell a story. The year before last, when we went shopping for Christmas, he still insisted on buying something for my mom, doing some of the shopping. So his mobility had declined quite a bit by then. And so I scoped out the store ahead of time and how far Dad would have to walk and whatever. And then I warned him that we might have to wait in line to pay. So I think he thought I was joking, because for years and years, we'd go to a specialty store, he would see what was on the mannequin that Mom would like, and that's what we would get. And then they'd gift wrap it while we went for lunch. So when we actually went shopping at this store, and we actually had to wait in a lineup, he was just shocked. You have to wait in line? And so he says, I'm not waiting in line. I'm going to sit on my walker. You can wait in the line. So, as Greg mentioned, Dad was a man of faith, and he definitely helped develop my spirituality. I remember when my grandpa passed away that he passed away suddenly. I was about 15 years old, and I was very angry with God that my grandpa had died. And my dad, instead of trying to make me feel better about it, he taught me that God can handle all my emotions, everything about me, and that I can be a completely whole person in the presence of God. And that was profound in my life. He also taught spiritual principles that have guided my life, and Greg mentioned these too, that people are people, that love your neighbor. That was truly him, and he loved people from all over the world in all walks of life. His unconditional love and constant belief in us were great values that he passed on. And his favorite verse was truly the way he lived: to act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God. In the last couple years, we've had the privilege of living with Mom and Dad, and it's been really special. And it was special because I was one of the few people that my dad would let help him. I mentioned his mobility had declined and he needed to use a walker. And last year, we were sitting out on the deck, and people were going by and picking the Saskatoons off the bush that's on the trail out behind our place. And he was griping that people were eating his Saskatoons. So we decided we should go picking Saskatoons. So he was okay walking to the gate of our complex. He made it there not too bad. And then he decided to sit on the walker and I could just push him. So that worked okay to the Saskatoon bush. So we did our picking. And then on the way back, he couldn't hold his feet up for very long. But instead of warning me in advance as I'm pushing this thing, he just put his feet down. And we go all askew and just kill ourselves laughing. And he says, if anyone saw us, they'd think we'd had too much to drink. Just a great memory. It's difficult when you need the help of other people, and especially when your faculties are pretty good. And his good nature went a long way towards making that a better situation. He teased me when I had to help him that I sure didn't do it as well as Jana. Now, Jana was his favorite home care worker, and he loved her, and we cannot say enough good things about Jana. And when it was my turn to fill in, he would say, you definitely need some practice in that sock putting on department, or whatever it happened to be. For the most part, he approached my helping with, and other people's helping with, good humor, much to his credit. As he was approaching the end of his life, I had a conversation with him about dying. Now, my dad's kidney function had dropped to about 7%, and the prognosis at that point was not great. And my dad was always going to live forever, and at least to 100. And then most recently, I think it was 106. Now, why anybody want to be 106? But anyway, he was always going to live a long time. So we had this conversation, and it was very, Dad, you're actually dying. And in that conversation, I told him, now, at this point in your life, it's all about enjoyment and comfort, Dad. And you'd think that when you were facing the reality that your days were few, you might feel sad or distressed or whatever. So he just sat for a few minutes. And then he says, well, if my life is all about comfort, I think I need a cookie. Could you bring me one of those ones with the jam in the middle? My dad was a big dreamer, and Greg talked about his solitude out on the farm and whatever, and his daydreaming, and that was really important to my dad, and right to the day he died. And one of his big dreams in recent years was about trying to control gravity. If there was a way we could control gravity, the world would be such a better place. And so he would daydream for hours about this. He even wrote a poem about dreaming. Dreaming was important to my dad, to my sister Sue in the 80s, and she wanted me to share it with you. It reads, dream, dream dreams, dream exciting dreams, dream happy dreams. Happiness is growing, growing is striving, striving is conquering, conquering oneself is freedom. Be free, escape. And it was signed by Pooh. Now, we called my dad Pooh, like Pooh Bear. And over the years, he'd say, you shouldn't call your father Pooh. It's disrespectful. And then I would say to him, well, what should we call you? I think you should call me Father. I was with my dad when he died and said to him, Dad, with all your dreaming, I wonder if you could ever imagine fully what comes next. I'm sure it will be your most exciting experience yet. Okay, now this is the part where I lose it, although it's about 4 lines ahead of where I have it written in my notes that I can lose it. He had a photograph in his office at home, and it was really precious to him. It was a photograph of children gathered around a well in Rwanda. And all around the photograph, he had little sayings tucked in the side that were important to him. And I want to share one with you now. It's by Henri Nouwen. No one has lived your life or my life before, and no one will ever live them again. Our lives are stones in the mosaic of human existence, priceless and irreplaceable. How was my dad?
It is my privilege to have been asked to do the meditation today. And let me just say that I always find it to be, of course, quite different to do this in person as opposed to in front of my computer. So if I happen to pause occasionally, it's because I need some composure. So let me begin by saying that Sid's life is a reflection of a story that is both personal and cosmic. And this, incidentally, is the case for every Christian. Walter Brueggemann, who is a prolific Old Testament scholar, spoke of God's story, that is, very broadly, the story of creation, fall, redemption, and restoration, as the primary narrative. It's that big story. But within this primary narrative, we, as Christians, live our local lives following the Lord in a specific time, in a specific place, or what Walter Brueggemann would call a derivative narrative. The derivative narratives of our lives, and of course of Sid's life, is a here and now reflection and infusion of that larger story. And it gives testimony to the God of the primary narrative. Our lives in Christ point to the veracity and to the relevance of the ancient biblical faith for our current place, our current time in history. And it demonstrates that the God witnessed to by that ancient text is still at work here and now in our lives. I met Sid in January of 1994 when I moved my family to Edmonton to take a pastoral position at McLaurin Memorial Baptist Church. I knew Sid, as has already been said, as someone generous and winsome. Generous with time, generous with wisdom, and winsome in that he saw the good side of things and would point us to those good things and urge us to move in that direction. So Sid was, for me, an encourager. And that is no small thing. I want you to consider for a moment some scriptures that feature a man named Barnabas. Now, Barnabas literally means son of encouragement. And we find that Barnabas was central to several key stories in the early church. So, for example, it was Barnabas who brought Saul, who was to become the Apostle Paul, to the apostles in Jerusalem. You may recall that the apostles were very wary of Saul because he had been murderously opposed to Christians. But Barnabas vouched for him, and the apostles took him in. It was Barnabas who investigated when the scattered Christians began telling the Greeks about Jesus. It was like, well, isn't this a Jewish thing? Well, they started telling non-Jewish people about Jesus. And so Barnabas went to the major city of Antioch in Asia Minor to investigate. And he found that the grace of God was actually flourishing among the Greeks. And he continued that to grow. He encouraged them to continue growing. Again, it was Barnabas, together with Paul, who were entrusted with money from the believers in Asia Minor to help the Christians in Jerusalem and Judea who were experiencing great difficulty. They knew he could be trusted. And it was Barnabas who stood by John Mark, who took him on a missionary journey when Paul had strongly opposed John Mark because he had abandoned him in an earlier mission trip. Because of his actions, Barnabas actually restored the relationship between Paul and John Mark. Now, there are more stories, of course, but I think we can say as we consider this that without Barnabas, without this encouraging presence, things would have been very, very different in the early church. Likewise, Sid was an encourager. He saw things happening and he would encourage what he called the good stuff. Keep doing this good stuff. And his encouragement would subsequently lead to many good things, both things immediate, but also many things which were beyond that immediate time frame. I'm sure many of you can think of times when Sid encouraged you and how that encouragement impacted you positively, and that in turn led to other good things that you might not even have thought of initially. For me personally, his encouragement led me to becoming a professor of management, and now through that, to the discipling of many Christians from literally around the world. They, in turn, will serve the Lord in their varied places of business, and they will work to change the character of those workplaces to ones where people are treated with dignity and where people can flourish. And of course, that's going to spread the impact even further. Such is encouragement. Encouragement is no small thing. We find it all over the New Testament, and of course, we also know that it is a gift from the Spirit of God. It's a spiritual gift. And I encountered that gift regularly in Sid. Another side of Sid was a deep sense of wonder. I knew Sid to be a brilliant engineer. I didn't know to what extent he built things. This is amazing to hear. I love that. But he was ever curious about how things worked. And at one point, I remember him showing me a jar of bitumen with some bacteria in it. And now, here's my caveat. I may be wrong in this because, wow, my mind just doesn't work that way. But I think these bacteria were of the kind that would actually break down the bitumen so that it might even flow better, like sweet crude might flow, right, in a pipe. And he was thrilled about this jar, and then he tucked it back away in the credenza. My last conversation with him included musings of gravity, how we might overcome gravity to make things work more easily, things like flight, getting things into space. Gravity, of course, is a force, as are many other phenomena, such as electromagnetic forces, which have been understood and utilized. And he had pondered gravity for some time, but that force and how to utilize it had always remained elusive. Though perhaps Sid, and by extension ourselves, don't always recognize it in the moment, Sid's work as an engineer and his curiosity about how things worked really reflected grappling after the mind of God and the work of his hands, this incredible creation in which we live. Sid also had, what I've come to learn, is a rather stubborn belief that everything could be fixed. And this reflects, of course, the growth in knowledge during his lifetime, but it also reflects a faith stance. So it's not just knowledge, it's also faith. as Jesus said, all things are possible with God. Though we have grown tremendously in what we know, consider the changes, for example, over the 90 years of Sid's life, we still really know so little. And as we talked about this, I shared with him these words from 1 Corinthians 2:9. As it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him. Well beyond what anyone has physically perceived through their senses, and well beyond what anyone has ever mentally conceived of, is a wonder beyond anything imaginable. And this is what the Lord has prepared for those who love him. And as we chatted, I said, this is what the Lord has prepared for you. Beyond imagination. We talked about how he will finally understand gravity, no less from the one who brought it into being in the first place. And yet, even that will be so minuscule. There will be so much more, much more, currently inconceivable, currently unfathomable. Well, sometime back here in this church, Sid provided a testimony to having seen the Lord. Reading his testimony recently, I was deeply moved by what he shared. He had shared that the moment that he got his cancer diagnosis, he had felt the arms of the Lord embrace him, and he heard the voice of the Lord saying to him, "It's okay, Sid. I'm with you." With that incident, and with that embrace of love by his Heavenly Father, Sid was changed. First, he noted that immediately my lifelong fear of cancer disappeared, and what was likely to be the worst day of my life became the best day. But then, over time, something more happened. He noted that this and several other events over the years, where he had encountered the living God, had freed him from what he called the prison of our cultural beliefs, in which he had matured as a young man and had lived under most of his life. This relief from the constrictions and the myopia of an Enlightenment mindset freed him, in his words, to experience and enjoy the mysteries and majesties of our God. And these mysteries and majesty are now fully revealed to him. Again, in his words, he noted, "I found new insights from the biblical stories as my spiritual imagination grows, and I am more and more able to live into the stories and to be formed by them." He closed his testimony with these words, "I can tell you with ever-growing certainty that I am the son of a loving God who calls me Sid." The Lord loved Sid, and he knew him by name. Echoing the words of the prophet Isaiah, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine." Well, such is the wonder and the majesty of God. He is the creator of heaven and earth, the maker of gravity, of space-time, of black holes, of stars and galaxies, and yet he knows us personally. He knows our name. and he knows what we're dealing with. And even quite beyond that, this God of heaven and earth loves us. And this is something Sid knew, and you will. Well, then, as already noted, we also know that Sid loved the Lord, and increasingly so through his life. But here is where we cannot keep these statements in the past tense. The Lord even now continues to love Sid, and Sid, now in the presence of the Lord, is experiencing the fullness of God's love from the God who is love. Though Sid is separated from us, he is not separated from the Lord. St. Paul, by the Spirit of God, said that nothing can separate us from the love of God that is in Jesus, not even death. And St. Paul, also by the Spirit of God, said that regardless of life or death, we belong to the Lord. And so Paul's words are these: for none of us lives for ourselves alone. None of us dies for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord. And if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. Death looks like final separation, but it isn't for those whose hope and whose trust and faith is in God. Jesus once said, God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And that includes Sid. So in closing, I want to turn to the words of David the psalmist, who writes this in Psalm 65, verse 4. Blessed are those you choose and bring near to live in your courts. Sid is one of those that the Lord has chosen, and he is in the courts of our Lord, now even more fully alive and enjoying him forever. Amen. I leave you with the following blessing, which was Sid's favorite blessing. This is a blessing that the Lord gave to Moses to give to the people. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen. If you would, please allow the family first to exit. They will make their way downstairs, and then we'll go out row by row, and you are invited, of course, to join the family downstairs to meet with them and also to have some refreshments. Thank you.